With all of the Space Marine index cards and the Dark Angels index cards and Deathwatch index cards and Blood Angels index cards, that's a lot of index cards. But what about detachments, and how does subfactions work in 10th edition? So first of all, let's look at a data card. Just one. And you can see down here, we have the faction keyword, Adeptus Astartes. If it has another word next to it, such as this one having Ultramarines, that is their subfaction. So still faction Adeptus Astartes, but with subfaction Ultramarine. Okay, that's the basic bit. And then we have detachments. So this is a Gladius task force detachment. If your army faction is Adeptus Astartes, you can use the Gladius task force detachment. So that will apply to all of the different flavors of Space Marine. Almost all. I'll explain that right at the end. So if I have Imperial Fists, or some, yellow coloured Space Marines that look like Imperial Fists, and I chose to paint them yellow 20 years ago, when even though I knew that the yellow highlighter is the one that runs out the fastest, the yellow crayon is the one that looks the worst. No, I decided to stick with yellow as a paint scheme, and I'm wedded to it now. So I have Imperial Fists. I can use these in a Gladius task force detachment. Especially because I like the idea of bolter discipline. It's very thematic for the Imperial Fists. But that isn't the only detachment my yellow Space Marines could use. I could also use them in the Unforgiven task force. It's not tied exactly to Dark Angels. If your army faction is Adeptus Astartes, you can use this Unforgiven task force detachment rule. And your army can include Dark Angels units. It doesn't have to. The only exception is it cannot include Adeptus Astartes units drawn from any other chapter. Now, even though I've called my army an Imperial Fist army, the units, like this one, they don't have a subfaction keyword, so I'm totally fine to use it in this Unforgiven detachment. And it would rather suit the flavour of Imperial Fists to have Grim Resolve, and also Grim Retribution to shoot back at someone that's just shot you. That's very much how the Imperial Fists work in 30k, the Horus Heresy game. So it's very thematic and totally allowed on the tabletop. Let's look at another one for my yellow Space Marines. The Black Templars Righteous Crusaders detachment rule. So again, if your army faction is Adeptus Astartes, you can use the Righteous Crusaders detachment rule. The restrictions though are that you cannot include any Adeptus Astartes Psychers. That means you could still include Inquisitors that are Psychers, using the Imperial Agents rule. You can include Black Templar units, but it cannot include Adeptus Astartes units drawn from any other chapter. So I couldn't have Captain Lysander because he has the explicit subfaction keyword Imperial Fist. Okay, let's look at it in reverse. What happens if I had a Black Templars painted army, and it also has Black Templars units, ones with the Black Templars subfaction keyword, for example, the Emperor's Champion? I could use these in a Gladius task force detachment as long as I didn't include units from more than one chapter. So just Black Templars and ones without a subfaction keyword, totally fine. This may seem a little confusing because that does mean that Black Templars would be able to use the Gladius task force detachment and include Librarians. So they can be fighting alongside Librarians, even though that's very much not how the Black Templars work. Ignore the law for now, just focus on the rules. There are no restrictions on the Gladius task force about using Librarians, okay? That restriction is just when you are using the Righteous Crusaders detachment rule. So Emperor's Champion, right next to a Librarian, they just feel at home. Let's take a Blood Angels unit as an example. Let's look at Mephiston. Chief Librarian Mephiston is very beautiful. The man has an excellent fashion sense, which I must compliment. One totally not vampire to another, yeah. Okay, so I could use Mephiston and some Death Company intercessors in a Gladius task force detachment, but I couldn't then also include Deathwatch units like Kill Team Cassius, because that would be mixing the subfaction within the Gladius task force. Not allowed. Only one subfaction chapter keyword. And so, I'm sorry, is that strength 2 on a heavy flamer? Can we get that FAQ'd, please? I know previously he had a heavy flamer that had the option to fire essentially poison gas that was automatically wounding on a 2+, but strength 2? What are you firing at them? Paint? Okay, moving on. So, that means that my kill team Cassius could fight alongside my Imperial Fists or Yellow Coloured Marines in a Gladius Task Force detachment, as long as I didn't have Captain Lysander, because he is Imperial Fist locked, just one subfaction keyword. Okay, I think we're getting it. Again, if we look at this Black Spear Task Force, the restrictions on Deathwatch units there apply only within the Black Spear Task Force detachment. If I had them in a Gladius Task Force detachment, I could again fight alongside units like Assault Marines. That restriction is just on that Black Spear Task Force detachment. I'm saying that word a lot, I hope it's not getting too weird, and I'm not saying it so many times that it loses meaning. So I can use these data cards for the Deathwatch in the Black Spear Task Force or in the Gladius Task Force, but only one. This isn't like in previous editions, where being Deathwatch meant that you had all of the Space Marine stratagems and also all of the Deathwatch stratagems. The stratagems are entirely linked to which detachment you have, so it's either these ones or these ones, depending on how you've arranged your detachment. You pick one detachment and you get its associated stratagems and enhancements. Now what I couldn't do is have Deathwatch keyword units in the Sons of Sanguinius detachment, because the Sons of Sanguinius detachment is locked to units that either don't have a chapter keyword or have the Blood Angels chapter keyword. So this Tactical Squad unit, totally fine. This Blood Angels unit, totally fine in the Sons of Sanguinius detachment, but not Kill Team Cassius because they have the Deathwatch subfaction. I'll explain it quickly with a graph. So when you're playing Space Marines, your faction keyword is Adeptus Astartes. Then you choose your detachment. So you could pick the Gladius Task Force detachment or the Black Spear Task Force detachment as two examples. You follow the restrictions, so both of them say you can't have units from more than one subfaction, and the Black Spear Task Force specifies that it is Deathwatch units or generic ones, apart from these particular units as mentioned in the restrictions. So after you've picked your detachment, your army follows the restrictions, and these are the bonuses you get, depending on which detachment you choose. I hope that's made it a bit clearer. But what about Space Wolves? I hear some of you say. Some of you who I'm ignoring. Because Space Wolves rules, they apply just the same as all the others. Blood Angels, Black Templars, Dark Angels, all the things I've mentioned also apply to Space Wolves. I just didn't mention them because they're stinky, disgusting werewolf creatures. Now, that thing I teased earlier and mentioned now. Grey Knights. Grey Knights cannot use any of these because they do not have the Adeptus Astartes faction keyword. They have their own Grey Knights faction. So even though they look like Space Marines, they can be painted very much like Space Marines, and they act and fight kind of like Space Marines. They're not Adeptus Astartes keyword, so ignore the law. Just look at the keywords there. They have their own detachment of Teleport Strike Force. I hope that's cleared up all of the different ways you can use Space Marines in 10th edition with the different detachments and sub-factions. And please feel free to put any questions in the comments. And my darlings and viewers, what about other stratagems? I'll see you there. Have a great day of 40k.